This is the only video you're going to need when it comes to defenses and kickers into week 16 of fantasy football. Today, I'll go over my top 20 defensive rankings of the week, as well as my top 20 kicker rankings at the end of the video. Nobody ever talks about kickers, so you're going to want to stick around to the end for that. But if you do appreciate this video and you are feeling generous today, please go down and hit that like button. It helps me out a ton. But I'm not going to waste your time. We'll start out in the S tier. We're going to have the Bills and the Packers as the number 1 and number 2 defense of the week. We've been stashing the Bills for a good amount of time for this exact reason of this matchup, and they get a great stretch of games. They get the Patriots this week, who are top 5 in fantasy points allowed to opposing defenses, but the Bills numbers themselves haven't necessarily been great, so putting them at number 1 might seem as a little bit of a stretch to them and their defensive success. 42 points and 44 points in their last 2 games, only averaging 7.4 fantasy points a game on the year. But we do have to be aware that they've had a pretty difficult stretch of games over their past few, in the back half of the season specifically, making people forget how good this defense is themselves. They're still top 10 in fantasy points produced. Now we're coming into this matchup against the Patriots, which is a real chance for this defense to show who they are and actually dominate for once when they're not playing one of the top offenses. The Patriots are an extremely turnover prone offense. With Drake May in here, he's averaging 1 interception a game. They don't have a ton of receiving talent that could make this defensive scheme change up or really just prove worrisome to this defense, so that's also a plus. This team is bottom 5 in scoring in the NFL, and they have a really bad offensive line. The upside for this Bills defense is very high because of the sacks, interceptions, and overall low scoring potential of this game. I expect at least 1 interception, 4 to 5 sacks, and probably less than 20 points for this Patriots team in total. If I had to guess, it would be about 14 points, and that is exactly what gets these defenses really high fantasy point totals. That's why they're number 1. But then we look into the Packers. This is a defense that people are sleeping on, all things considered. They are top 5 in the NFL as far as real life defenses go, and their fantasy points have been showing that fact. They're averaging 9 fantasy points a game. But most importantly, this team is great at generating turnovers. They are 4th in total interceptions. They're 7th in sacks. They have 40 total on the year, and they allow the 10th least total yardage to opposing offenses on the year as well. I've had them in stash videos for long enough now. You should have been able to get them, but we've been holding them for this moment. Again, now they get a matchup against the Saints, who are dealing with a ton of quarterback and just team issues in general. We have Spencer Rattler expected to start. That's not going to provide the Saints any type of upside, and they have one of the lowest implied team totals as a team specifically of the week. That is another reason this defense is going to be this high in the rankings. We also don't have Kamara in this matchup. He's already ruled doubtful to play. If they don't have a run game going, you can expect the rest of this offense to be struggling so much. This Packers defense has a great pressure rate. They know how to play, how to win at home in the cold. It's all just great situations for them. I'd expect, again, 1 interception, about 5 sacks, and they're 2nd in rankings for this week for a reason. So we're going to be dropping it down to the A tier here. We will start with the Lions, Falcons, and the Vikings. We have no idea essentially what type of offense and team we are expecting from the Bears in this matchup for the Lions, but if you look at their past few games, you can kind of expect what situation is coming. Last week, 12 points against the Vikings. They had Caleb Williams with 18 for 31, 191 passing yards and a touchdown. The week before that, in a loss to the 49ers, they only put up 13 points. Caleb Williams went 17 for 23, 134 yards and 2 touchdowns. So it's not bad, but it's not necessarily great, and a ton of upside being generated for the Bears, and it doesn't get any easier in this matchup against the Lions, who are top 5 in restricting overall running back success. If we don't have anything coming from DeAndre Swift, they're going to have no choice but to lean on the pass, and you'd think that's a good thing because you look at all these options. They have Rome, they have Keenan Allen. I mean, this offense should be decent, but when you look at the Lions defense themselves, there is a few key reasons that they're not higher or in the S tier, and the main one here is going to be the injuries. All sides of the defense are dealing with a little bit of setback from that. It is hurting them, which is part of the reason why they're top 5 in wide receiver success and fantasy points allowed. That's going to be good for Caleb Williams again with his options, but he does have one of the lowest time to pass percentages in the pocket in the NFL. So the Bears do have a little bit of light in this matchup, which is why the Lions aren't rated higher. They are very vulnerable against the pass and to wide receivers, which is a plus. Again, the Bears do have some pretty good receiving options, but in 15 weeks, they haven't really been able to put it together as far as a whole on offense. The Lions are allowing a ton of yardage and points, but that has also led them to be top 5 in interceptions on the year. So this is a tougher matchup for Caleb Williams. The Lions are going to be here next. But looking into the next defense of this tier, the Falcons are going to be here. They do get bumped up because of this matchup. Last week they did what they had to do against the Raiders, putting up 20 fantasy points, showing us their ability in positive matchups to perform. And now they continue that with a good one against the Giants, which is one of the best, all things considered, in fantasy football. They allow the 3rd most points to opposing defenses. This is another team with a non-existent consistent offensive line. We've had Drew Lock starting in this offense for 2 full games at this point, and in that sample size, he's had less than 200 passing yards on average, 2 total interceptions, and 0 touchdowns. So we will have Malik Nabers playing. He was dealing with a little bit of injury previously in the week. That's definitely going to help this Giants team out a little bit, but the Falcons defense has been playing a lot better since their bye week in week 12, almost 5 sacks and 1 turnover per game in that stretch. Now with the Vikings next up in this tier, I don't have to get too deep into the defense themselves because we know they are great. They're number 2 on the year in total fantasy scoring. They're also the second hardest team to run on outside of the Chiefs at number 1, but they're 100% a pass funnel of a defense, allowing a ton of success to wide receivers. Last week, Keenan Allen went for 82 and 1 touchdown. The week before that, Darnell Mooney had 142 yards. Ray McLeod had 98. We also had Drake London with 70. So all year, this defense has been struggling against the pass. But the reason I say this when you're looking at them ranked this high is because yes, they're allowing a ton of pass volume, but what that does is allow quarterbacks and opportunities for interceptions and to make some mistakes. When you're passing that much, the Vikings are number 1 in the entire NFL in forcing interceptions every single week. They're averaging 1.4 interceptions per game. That is absolutely insane. Now they come into a matchup against the Seahawks, who are 7th in total pass volume this year. Geno is cleared to play. He was dealing with injury earlier in the week, but there is still a very real chance that maybe he's at 80%. Yes, he's cleared to play. He's going to be in this offense, but that doesn't mean he's playing at a 100% level. The Seahawks do still carry the potential to pop off, so that's going to be lowering this Vikings defensive potential just a little bit, which is why they are ranked where they are. They have DK, even though he's not performing at the level that we've expected. JSN, Kenneth Walker, if he plays, Zach Charbonnet is just ruled to be healthy now. They do still have the potential to put up points, but the Vikings defense, again, is great. They should force turnovers. Moving it down to the B tier, though, these are teams that can be started, but they do carry a little bit more of red flags themselves. The Colts and the Bengals are going to be here. These are 2 teams with weaker internal units here, but amazing matchups, all things considered. The Colts come into this matchup against the Tennessee Titans, who are not going to have Will Levis in the starting lineup. It will be Mason Rudolph. In the games that he has played this year as a starter, he's averaging 1 interception, about 203 passing yards a game with 1.5 touchdowns. So definitely not the best quarterback in the world, but not a true liability, I guess you could say. Rudolph over Levis is definitely going to lower the turnover upside for this defense, and the Colts are probably going to be a better defense if Will Levis plays because of how many interceptions he throws, but still, it's positive. This team is projected bottom 5 points as a single total in the week. This is more of a high floor play than it is a high upside play because Mason Rudolph is not the best quarterback again, but he's nothing like Will Levis as far as turnovers go. The Bengals face the complete opposite issue here coming into a matchup against the Browns. It's a great matchup here. The Bengals defense on the other side, though, is absolutely atrocious. They're allowing almost 30 points a game to opposing offenses. Their offensive line does have some holes in it, so they can generate a good amount of sacks if they get that pressure right there. So it's a high risk, high reward play, again, because the Bengals defense is not good. They allow a ton of points to wide receivers. This should be a really good spot for Jerry Jeudy to be starting, but this could be a spot where interceptions and turnovers alone are making the Bengals a really positive defense, even if the Browns put up a ton of points themselves. But to finish out this tier, we're going to have the Eagles and the Rams. With the Eagles, they get a more negative matchup against the Commanders, but this defense themselves is very, very good. They are number 1 in stopping the pass and stopping the run, and also in scoring in total. So this is a perfect spot for them, but their issue has been turning it into fantasy points and fantasy success. This defense is the number 2 defense in interceptions forced a game. They have a great pressure rate, but they're not as high as far as total sack numbers as you would expect. The last time they played the Commanders, they had 3 sacks and an interception, only allowing Jaden Daniels and this team to put up 18 points. That is positive for them. The chip help offense that the Commanders are running as far as their routes and just help blocking is positive, but it's not as good as it was in the beginning of the season. So if that pressure rate does come from the Eagles, we can't expect a good amount of sacks. Jaden Daniels has been getting sacked on more of the pressure rates from defenses now as he was in the beginning of the season, so there is a potential for that. But with the Commanders, we do know this is one of the better offenses in the NFL, so they can put up points. The Rams on the other side get the Jets in a matchup which should be positive, but there is 2 ways that this game can go. The thing here is that the Jets have actually been pretty good as far as their offense over the past few weeks. Now, we have to be fair and remember that last week was a matchup against the Jaguars. They are one of the most positive defenses to put numbers on, so obviously they did good. Nonetheless, Aaron Rodgers did have 3 touchdowns for 298 yards and 0 touchdowns. That's a great game for him, especially considering his previous games for this year. And they actually do have some playmakers and guys that will make a difference on the Rams side. Cam Curl, Jared Verse, Byron Young, they've all been playing pretty good and can make a difference in this game. And they have been up and down so far this year as far as fantasy points go, and they've had success. It hasn't really been able to stick. They do great one game as far as the defense and then have 0 sacks the next. Either this defense shows up and Aaron Rodgers has a really down day, or he continues to have the success of 0 turnovers and touchdowns. So there's 2 ways this can go, which is why this defense is ranked ranked so low. But then we're going to go look at the C tier here. We have the Steelers, Cardinals, and Chiefs. The Steelers are one of those defenses that is absolutely amazing as far as an internal unit, but they do get very bad matchups here. The Ravens is this one for them. The number one worst matchup. We know this offense is great. They are the defense number 3 overall on the year. They managed to put up 11 fantasy points on the Ravens the last time they did play in week 11, but in that game, the Ravens did have 3 turnovers, and that's very unlikely to happen again. TJ Watt is questionable. He looks like he's going to be playing in this matchup here. There is a chance that he is a little bit restricted, not playing 100% of the snaps, but any snap that he is not on the field is a huge liability for this defense as far as fantasy points goes. They're not going to have as high of a sack number or potential. We know Lamar Jackson is very good at making decisions and scrambling out of the pocket here, but the next defense we're going to have is the Cardinals, who are the opposite of this Steelers game as far as they get a really positive matchup here against the Panthers, who surprisingly haven't been as positive as you'd expect ever since Bryce Young came back. They're still top 10 in fantasy points allowed on the year, but ever since Bryce Young came back from being benched, they've been a lot better than that. So the Cardinals do get a pretty good one here against them. They still don't have a good offensive line, so they can generate sacks, but again, this is a defense that's been performing but on a pretty inconsistent rate. They've had almost as many 0 sack games as they had 5+ games, so we don't know what to expect here. If they do show up, they'll put up 10 plus fantasy points. If they don't, it could be more towards 1, 2, or 3. So it's a spike defense. They don't really have the highest projected floor and safety. Just take that for what you will. Then you have the Chiefs in a negative matchup against the Texans here. They had a really good game last week against the Browns, as the Chiefs did, but again, that's the Browns. They have Jameis Winston. They throw a lot of interceptions. They get sacked. Like, it is what it is. That offense is nowhere near the Texans here. They have Nico Collins. He's been performing well. CJ Stroud hasn't been as good, but still can perform. The run defense for the Chiefs is really what's going to be good for them and produce the fantasy points, hopefully restricting the Texans in that aspect here. But then we're going to be dropping it down to the D tier. These teams can be started. They are a lot more risky based on internal units or matchups. These are my last resort teams. If you don't have anything on the waivers, they're going to be the number 1 options for you. Then we have the F tier teams I wouldn't consider starting. Again, they're better than the other teams that I haven't listed on this list and that are still sitting on the waiver wire. But here are the total kicker rankings coming into week 16. I'll put them all on the screen at once. Screenshot it, save it, watch this video on 0.5 speed, do whatever you have to do to internalize this and use it for yourself. Pick up these kickers off the waiver wire, check your waiver wire to see if these top guys are even there. The S tier guys are going to be absolutely amazing. Kicker points are heavily based on offensive success, but also inefficiency in the red zone. A team can score 40 points, but if their kicker only gets opportunities in the extra point game, he's still not going to put up that many points. So you want to be getting a team that has a lot of offense and gets in the opposing team's side of the field a lot, but don't necessarily capitalize on those red zone trips every time. They can get some deep field goals. But that's going to finish off this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one of the major starts and sits coming tomorrow.